Okay, today is the 2nd of August, 2010. Now we come to Majjhima, Nikāya Sutta 35, Culasaccaka Sutta, the shorter discourse to Saccaka. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Vesali in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Now on that occasion, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was staying at Vesali, a debater and a clever speaker, regarded by many as a saint. He was making this statement before the Vesali assembly: I see no recluse or Brahmin, the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, even one claiming to be Arahant Sammasambuddha, who would not shake, shiver and tremble and sweat under the armpits if he were to engage in debate with me. Even if I were to engage a senseless pose in debate, it would shake, shiver and tremble if it were to engage in debate with me. So what shall I say of a human being? Then when it was morning, the Venerable Assaji dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Vesali for alms. As Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was walking and wandering for exercise in Vesali, he saw the Venerable Assaji coming in the distance, and went up to him and exchanged greetings with him. Let's stop here for a moment. So you can see this Saccaka Niganta Putta was a debater, very clever, very smart in debating, and also a big boaster. He said even if you were to engage a pose, even the pose also was shiver and tremble. What more of a human being? And this Venerable Assaji is one of the 5 monks who were first enlightened. So Saccaka saw him, he came up to him, talked. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, stood at one side and said to him, Master Assaji, how does the recluse Gotama discipline his disciples? And how is the recluse Gotama's instruction usually presented to his disciples? And Venerable Assaji said, this is how the Blessed One disciplines his disciples, Agivesana, and this is how the Blessed One's instruction is usually presented to his disciples. Monks, material form or body is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volition is impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. Monks, material form is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, volition is not self, consciousness is not self. All volitions are impermanent, all things are not self. Here, this one, they say all formations are impermanent, but the word is sankhara, so I like to translate it as volitions are impermanent, all things are not self. That is how the Blessed One disciplines his disciples, and that is how the Blessed One's instruction is usually presented to his disciples. And Saccaka said, if this is what the recluse Gotama asserts, we hear indeed what is disagreeable. Perhaps some time or other we might meet Master Gotama and have some conversation with him. Perhaps we might detach him from that evil view. Stop here for a moment. So, Venerable Assaji says, the Buddha's instruction is that the 5 aggregates are impermanent. The 5 aggregates are not self. All volitions are impermanent, and all things or dhammas are not self. Now at that time, 500 Lichavis had met together in an assembly hall for some business or other. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, went to them and said, come forth, good Lichavis, come forth. Today there will be some conversation between me and the recluse Gotama. If the recluse Gotama maintains before me what was maintained before me by one of his famous disciples, the monk named Assaji, then just as a strong man might seize a long-haired ram by the hair and drag him to and drag him fro and drag him round about, so in debate I will drag the recluse Gotama to and drag him fro and drag him round about, just as a strong brewer's workman might throw a big brewer's sieve into a deep water tank, and taking it by the corners, drag it to and drag it fro and drag it round about. So in debate, I would drag the recluse Gotama to and drag him fro and drag him round about. Just as a strong brewer's mixer might take a strainer by the corners and shake it down and shake it up and thump it about, so in debate I will shake the recluse Gotama down and shake him up and thump him about. And just as a 60-year-old elephant might plunge into a deep pond and enjoy playing the game of ham washing, so I shall enjoy playing the game of ham washing with the recluse Gotama. Come forth, good Lichavis, come forth. Today there will be some conversation between me and the recluse Gotama. Stop here for a moment. Nah. So you see this braggart, he wants to debate with the Buddha, and he's so sure that he's going to win. He's telling everybody to come and witness. Thereupon some Lichavis said, how can the recluse Gotama refute Saccaka, the Niganta's son's assertions? On the contrary, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, will refute the recluse Gotama's assertions. And some Lichavis said, who is Saccaka, the Niganta's son, that he could refute the Blessed One's assertions? On the contrary, the Blessed One will refute Saccaka, the Niganta's son's assertions. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, went with 500 Lichavis to the hall with the peaked roof in the great wood. Now on that occasion, a number of monks were walking up and down in the open. And Saccaka, the Niganta's son, went up to them and asked, where is Master Gotama staying now, sirs? We want to see Master Gotama. And they said, the Blessed One has entered the great wood, Agivesana, and is sitting at the root of a tree for the day's abiding. This, stop here for a moment. This Agivesana must be his clan. Sometimes they address the person by the clan name. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, together with a large following of Lichavis, entered the great wood and went to the Blessed One. He exchanged greetings with the Blessed One, and after this courteous and amiable talk was finished, sat down at one side. Some of the Lichavis paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down at one side. Some exchanged greetings with him, and when this courteous and amiable talk was finished, sat down at one side. Some extended their hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One and sat down at one side. Some pronounced their name and clan in the Blessed One's presence and sat down at one side. Some kept silent and sat down at one side. When Saccaka, the Niganta's son, had sat down, he said to the Blessed One, I would like to question Master Gotama on a certain point, if Master Gotama would grant me the favor of an answer to the question. Ask what you like, Agivesana. How does Master Gotama discipline his disciples, and how is Master Gotama's instruction usually presented to his disciples? This is how I discipline my disciples, Agivesana, and this is how my instruction is usually presented to my disciples. Monks, material form or body is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volition is impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. Monks, material form or body is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, volition is not self, consciousness is not self. All volitions are impermanent, all things are not self. That is the way I discipline my disciples, and that is how my instruction is usually presented to my disciples. Stop here for a moment. There are several suttas where sometimes certain monk, certain arahant, he explains the Dhamma in a certain way to a lay person, and then this lay person, he asks the same question of the Buddha, and Buddha gives exactly the same reply. So just like here, one of the reasons could be either that the Buddha's teaching is quite standard, or he can read the mind of this fellow, and he knows exactly what his disciples said, so he says exactly the same thing. And then Saccaka said, a simile occurs to me, Master Gotama. Explain how it occurs to you, Agivesana, the Blessed One said. Just as when seeds and plants, whatever their kind, reach growth, increase and maturation, all do so in dependence upon the earth, based upon the earth. And just as when strenuous works, whatever their kind, are done, all are done in dependence upon the earth, based upon the earth. So too, Master Gotama, a person has material form as self, and based upon material form, he produces merit or demerit. A person has feeling as self, and based upon feeling, he produces merit or demerit. A person has perception as self, and based upon perception, he produces merit or demerit. A person has volition as self, and based upon volition, he produces merit or demerit. A person has consciousness as self, and based upon consciousness, he produces merit or demerit. And the Buddha said, Agivesana, are you not asserting thus? Material form is myself, feeling is myself, perception is myself, volition is myself, consciousness is myself. And he said, I assert thus, Master Gotama, material form is myself, feeling is myself, perception is myself, volition is myself, consciousness is myself, and so does this great multitude. And the Buddha said, what has this great multitude to do with you, Agivesana? Please confine yourself to your own assertion alone. And he said, then Master Gotama, I assert thus, material form is myself, feeling is myself, perception is myself, volition is myself, consciousness is myself. And Buddha said, in that case, Agivesana, I shall ask you a question in return. Answer it as you choose. What do you think, Agivesana? Would a head anointed noble king, for example, King Pasenadi of Kosala, or King Ajatasattu, Vadehiputta of Magadha, exercise the power in his own realm to execute those who should be executed, to find those who should be fined, and to banish those who should be banished? And he said, Master Gotama, a head anointed noble king, for example, King Pasenadi of Kosala, or King Ajatasattu, Vadehiputta of Magadha, would exercise the power in his own realm to execute those who should be executed, to find those who should be fined, and to banish those who should be banished. For even these oligarchic communities and societies, such as the Vajins and the Malians, exercise the power in their own realm to execute those who should be executed, to find those who should be fined, and to banish those who should be banished. So all the more so should a head anointed noble king, such as King Pasenadi of Kosala, or King Ajatasattu Vadehiputta of Magadha, he would exercise it, Master Gotama, and he will be worthy to exercise it. So here, the Buddha is setting him up into a trap. The Buddha is, since he says that the five aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, is a self, then the Buddha asked him this question, whether a king, ruler of his own realm, would have the power to execute some people, to fine some people, and to banish some people. And he said they would definitely have the power and be worthy of it. Then the Buddha said, what do you think, Agivesana, when you say thus, material form or body is myself? Do you exercise any such power over that material form as to say, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus? When this was said, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was silent. I stop here for a moment. So here you see, the Buddha first asked him whether a king of his own country would have total power, and he says yes. So if you say that material form or body is myself, then material form or body is yours. You should be able to have complete control over it. Whatever you want of the body, let my body be thus, let my body not be thus. You should be able to have that power to determine how your body should be like. But when he asked Saccaka didn't know how to reply, kept silent. A second time, the Blessed One asked the same question. And the second time, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was silent. Then the Blessed One said to him, Agivesana, answer now. Now is not the time to be silent. If anyone, when asked a reasonable question up to the third time by the Tathagata, still does not answer, his head splits into 7 pieces there and then. Now on that occasion, a thunderbolt wielding spirit, holding an iron thunderbolt that burned, blazed and glowed, appeared in the air above Saccaka, the Niganta's son, thinking, if this Saccaka, the Niganta's son, when asked a reasonable question up to the third time by the Blessed One, still does not answer, I shall split his head into 7 pieces here and now. The Blessed One saw the thunderbolt wielding spirit, and so did Saccaka, the Niganta's son. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was frightened, alarmed and terrified. Seeking his shelter, asylum and refuge in the Blessed One, he said, ask me, Master Gotama, I will answer. I'll stop here for a moment. So you see, the Buddha told him, if you don't answer, by the third time I ask a reasonable question, your head will split into 7 pieces. And suddenly this thunderbolt wielding spirit appeared above him, holding this thunderbolt, ready to smash him. And he got so frightened. So where this thunderbolt wielding spirit came from, it's not explained. The Buddha used his psychic power to create this, or this Deva as a protector of the Buddha. What do you think, Agivesana, when you say thus, material form is myself, do you exercise any such power over that material form as to say, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus? No, Master Gotama. Pay attention, Agivesana. Pay attention how you reply. What you said before does not agree with what you said afterwards, nor does what you said afterwards agree with what you said before. What do you think, Agivesana, when you say thus, feeling is myself, do you exercise any power over that feeling as to say, let my feeling be thus, let my feeling not be thus? No, Master Gotama. Pay attention, Agivesana, pay attention how you reply. What you said before does not agree with what you said afterwards, nor does what you said afterwards agree with what you said before. What do you think, Agivesana, when you said thus, perception is myself, do you exercise any power over that perception as to say, let my perception be thus, let my perception not be thus? No, Master Gotama. Pay attention, Agivesana, pay attention how you reply. What you said before does not agree with what you said afterwards, nor does what you said afterwards agree with what you said before. What do you think, Agivesana, when you say thus, volition is myself? Do you exercise any such power over volition so as to say, let my volition be thus, let my volition not be thus? No, Master Gotama. Pay attention, Agivesana, pay attention how you reply. What you said before does not agree with what you said afterwards, nor does what you said afterwards agree with what you said before. What do you think, Agivesana, when you say thus, consciousness is myself? Do you exercise any such power over that consciousness as to say, let my consciousness be thus, let my consciousness not be thus? No, Master Gotama. Pay attention, Agivesana, pay attention how you reply. What you said before does not agree with what you said afterwards, nor does what you said afterwards agree with what you said before. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, you say the 5 aggregates is you, is yourself. Then you should have complete control over the 5 aggregates. But do you have? Then he says no. So the Buddha each time makes the point that what he said before is not what he's saying later. To let all the crowd of people see that he is contradicting himself. The Buddha said, what do you think, Agivesana? Is material form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Master Gotama. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Master Gotama. Is what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Master Gotama. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is making him see that material form is impermanent and a source of suffering. So it is not fit to regard it as mine or I or myself, because if you do that, then you are taking what is impermanent and suffering to be yourself, so you are carrying a burden unnecessarily. What do you think, Agivesana? Is feeling permanent or impermanent? Similarly, perception, volition, consciousness and consciousness, and to all this is impermanent, Master Gotama. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Master Gotama. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Master Gotama. So So he agrees that the five aggregates are not fit to be regarded as mine, I am, or myself. What do you think, Agivesana? When one adheres to suffering, resorts to suffering, holds to suffering, and regards what is suffering does, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Could one ever fully understand suffering oneself, or abide with suffering utterly destroyed? How could one, Master Gotama? No, Master Gotama. What do you think, Agivesana? That being so, do you not adhere to suffering, resort to suffering, hold to suffering, and regard what is suffering does? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. How could I not, Master Gotama? Yes, Master Gotama. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, what you take to be the self is suffering. So if you take it as yourself, then you are resorting to suffering, adhering to suffering, holding on to suffering. So in other words, is making it plain that Agivesana is a fool, taking what is suffering to be the self. And the Buddha said, it is as though a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, were to take a sharp axe and enter the wood. There he would see a large plantain trunk, straight, young, and with no fruit but core. Stop here for a moment. This plantain plantain tree is the banana tree. Then he would cut it down at the root, cut off the crown, and unroll the leaf sheets. But as he went on unrolling the leaf sheets, he would never come even to any sapwood, let alone hardwood. So too, Agivesana, when you are pressed, questioned and cross-questioned by me about your own assertion, you turn out to be empty, vacant and mistaken. But it was you who made this statement before the Vesali assembly. I see no recluse or Brahmin, the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, even one claiming to be Arahant Sammasambuddha, who would not shake, shiver and tremble and sweat under the armpits if he were to engage in debate with me. Even if I were to engage a senseless pose in debate, it would shake, shiver and tremble if it were to engage in debate with me. So what shall I say of a human being? Now there are drops of sweat on your forehead, and you have soaked through your upper robe and fallen to the ground. But there is no sweat on my body now. And the Blessed One uncovered his golden-colored body before the assembly. When this was said, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping, and head down, glum, without response. So here the Buddha, because the Buddha can read his mind, the Buddha said, you were boasting earlier that anyone that engages in debate with you would shake, tremble, and all this. But now I'm not shaking or trembling, I'm not sweating, but you are. Then Dumukha, the son of the Lichavis, seeing Saccaka, the Niganta's son, in such a condition, said to the Blessed One, a simile occurs to me, Master Gotama. Explain how it occurs to you, Dumukha. Suppose, Venerable Sir, not far from a village or town, there was a pond with a crab in it, and then a party of boys and girls went out from the town or village to the pond, went into the water and pulled the crab out of the water and put it on dry land. And whenever the crab extended a leg, they cut it off, broke it and smashed it with sticks and stones, so that the crab, with all its legs cut off, broken and smashed, would be unable to get back to the pond as before. So too, all Saccaka, the Niganta's son's contortions, writhings and vacillations have been cut off, broken and smashed by the Blessed One, and now he cannot get near the Blessed One again for the purpose of debate. When this was said, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, told him, wait, Dumukha, wait, we are not speaking with you here. Wait, we are speaking with Master Gotama. Stop here for a moment. So you see this fellow, even when he is shamed in front of this big crowd, his ego is showing up again. Then he said, let that talk of ours be, Master Gotama. Like that of ordinary recluses and Brahmins, it was mere prattle, I think. But in what way is a disciple of the recluse Gotama one who carries out his instruction, who responds to his advice, who has crossed beyond doubt, become free from perplexity, gained intrepidity, and became independent of others in the teacher's dispensation. So in other words, he's asking how, in what way is disciple an Arya. And the Buddha said, here Agivesana, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a disciple of mine sees all material form as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of feeling whatever, any kind of perception, volition, consciousness whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. A disciple of mine sees all the five aggregates as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. It is in this way that a disciple of mine is one who carries out my instruction, who responds to my advice, who has crossed beyond doubt, become free from perplexity, gain intrepidity, and become independent of others in the teacher's dispensation. So, stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is saying that a disciple of his will see with proper wisdom the five aggregates, whatever type of five aggregates is not mine, it's not I, it's not myself. Master Gautama, in what way is a monk an arahant, with taste destroyed, one who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and is completely liberated through final knowledge? Here Agivesana, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk has seen all material form as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And through not clinging, he is liberated. Any kind of feeling, any kind of perception, volition, consciousness, whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a monk has seen all the aggregates as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And through not clinging, he is liberated. It is in this way that a monk is an arahant, with taste destroyed, one who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and is completely liberated through final knowledge. Stop here for a moment. So earlier the Buddha was describing an Arya, is one who sees the five aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness as they actually are with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Whereas the Arahant has also seen the five aggregates as this is not mine, this is I am not, this I am not, this is not myself. And because of not clinging to them, he becomes liberated. Just gone the final step. And the Buddha continued. When a monk's mind is thus liberated, he possesses three unsurpassable qualities: unsurpassable vision, unsurpassable practice of the way, and unsurpassable deliverance. When a monk is thus liberated, he still honors, reveres, and venerates the Tathagata thus. The Blessed One is enlightened, and he teaches the Dhamma for the sake of enlightenment. The Blessed One is tamed, and he teaches the Dhamma for taming oneself. The Blessed One is at peace, and he teaches the Dhamma for the sake of peace. The Blessed One has crossed over, and he teaches the Dhamma for crossing over. The Blessed One has attained Nibbana, and he teaches the Dhamma for attaining Nibbana. When this was said, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, replied, Master Gautama, we were bold and impudent in thinking we could attack Master Gautama in debate. A man might attack a elephant and find safety, yet he could not attack Master Gautama and find safety. A man might attack a blazing mass of fire and find safety, yet he could not attack Master Gautama and find safety. A man might attack a terrible poisonous snake and find safety, yet he could not attack Master Gautama and find safety. We were bold and impudent in thinking we could attack Master Gautama in debate. Let the Blessed One, together with the Sangha of monks, consent to accept tomorrow's meal from me. The Blessed One consented in silence. Then, knowing that the Blessed One had consented, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, addressed the Lichavis. Hear me, Lichavis. The recluse Gotama, together with the Sangha of monks, has been invited by me for tomorrow's meal. You may bring to me whatever you think would be suitable for him. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, finally, Saccaka acknowledged that the Buddha is invincible. You cannot hope to win a debate with the Buddha. Then after that, he invited the Buddha and the monks for a meal. But he noticed here that he's asking the lay people to bring whatever food for him so that he can offer to them. Probably he has a lot of supporters. Then when the night had ended, the Lichavis brought 500 ceremonial dishes of milk rice as gifts of food. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, had good food of various kinds prepared in his own park, and had the time announced to the Blessed One. It is time, Master Gotama, the meal is ready. Then, it being morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went with the Sangha of monks to the park of Saccaka, the Niganta's son, and sat down on the seat made ready. Then with his own hands, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, served and satisfied the Sangha of monks, headed by the Buddha with the various kinds of good food. When the Blessed One had eaten and had withdrawn his hand from the bowl, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, took a low seat, sat down at one side, and said to the Blessed One, Master Gotama, may the merit and the great meritorious fruits of this act of giving be for the happiness of the givers. And the Buddha said, Agivesana, whatever comes about from giving to a recipient such as yourself, one who is not free from lust, not free from hate, not free from delusion, that will be for the givers. And whatever comes about from giving to a recipient such as myself, one who is free from lust, free from hate, free from delusion, that will be for you. That's the end of the sutta. So this last part, the Buddha says that those people who gave to you, they will have the merit of giving to someone who still has lust, hatred and delusion. But you who made the offering to me, you will have the merit of giving to one freed of lust, hatred and delusion. In other words, your merit in giving to me is much more than the merit of the people who offered the food to you. So that's the end of the sutta. So this sutta, there's not so much Dhamma here, except that it's a bit comical. This great boaster coming to debate with the Buddha and thinking that he can shake the Buddha up and down and thump him about and all this thing. And in the end, he's shamed before this crowd of people. Now the next sutta is 36, Mahasaccaka Sutta, the greater discourse to Saccaka. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Vesali in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Now on that occasion, when it was morning, the Blessed One had finished dressing and had taken his bowl and outer robe, desiring to go into Vesali for alms. Then, as Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was walking and wandering for exercise, he came to the hall with the peaked roof in the great wood. The Venerable Ananda saw him coming in the distance and said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, here comes Saccaka, the Niganta's son, a debater and a clever speaker, regarded by many as a saint. He wants to discredit the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. It would be good if the Blessed One would sit down for a while out of compassion. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, went up to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. Stop here for a moment. So this must be later, after the first debate with the Buddha. Still, Venerable Ananda felt that this guy is still out to discredit the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. So he asked the Buddha to sit down for a while to engage in talk with this fellow. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Master Gotama, there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of body, but not development of mind. They are touched by bodily painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by bodily painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, hot blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, go out of one's mind. So then the mind was subservient to the body. The body wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the mind was not developed. But there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. They are touched by mental painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by mental painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, hot blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, go out of one's mind. So then the body was subservient to the mind. The mind wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the body was not developed, Master Gotama. It has occurred to me, surely Master Gotama's disciples abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. Stop here for a moment. You see this ignoramus, this Saccaka, he doesn't know what is development of body and what is development of mind. So he assumes that those ascetics who practice ascetic practices and torture their body, they are pursuing development of body. That's why he says those who abide pursuing development of body, they are touched by bodily painful feeling. And then he thinks that those who pursue development of mind, they in the same way they torture their mind so that they get mental painful feeling. So he sees that the Buddha and the Buddha's disciples are not practicing all these ascetic practices, the external ascetics practice. So he assumes that the body, that the Buddha, here he says, the body is not developed. He says, surely Master Gotama's disciples abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. So because the Buddha's disciples don't torture their body, he says the Buddha's disciples are not developing their body, but they seem to be developing their mind. They seem to be meditating a lot, and then he thinks by meditating a lot, they're getting a lot of mental pain. So he thinks that the Buddha, his disciples are pursuing development of mind only. Then the Buddha said, but Agivesana, what have you learned about development of body? And he said, well, there are, for example, Nanda Vacha, Kisa Sankicha, Makali Gosala. They go naked, rejecting conventions, licking their hands, not coming when asked, not stopping when asked. They do not accept food brought or food specially made or an invitation to a meal. They receive nothing from a pot, from a bowl, across a threshold, across a stick, across a pestle, from two eating together, from a pregnant woman, from a woman giving suck, from a woman lying with a man, from where food is advertised to be distributed, from where a dog is waiting, from where flies are buzzing. They accept no fish or meat. They drink no liquor, wine, or fermented brew. They keep to one house, to one morsel. They keep to 2 houses, to 2 morsels. 3, 4, up to 7 houses and 7 morsels. They live on 1 saucerful a day, on 2 saucerfuls a day, 3, 4, up to 7 saucerfuls a day. They take food once a day, once every 2 days, once every 3, 4, 5, up to once every 7 days, and so on, up to once every fortnight. They dwell pursuing the practice of taking food at stated intervals. Stop here for a moment. So here, you see this list. When the Buddha asks him, what do you know about development of body? He mentions all these ascetic practices that external ascetics practice. And some of them, you see, they don't accept food from a pregnant woman, from a woman giving suck, from where a dog is waiting, from where flies are buzzing. This is compassion without wisdom, because they think if they accept food from a pregnant woman, then the baby in the womb will not have enough to eat. When they accept food from a woman giving suck, then the baby also will not have enough milk to eat. If they accept food where a dog is waiting, then the dog will not have enough to eat. So our compassion for the dog. And then when flies are buzzing about, they think that if they accept food, the flies also will not have a chance to eat. So this is stupid compassion without wisdom. And then the others, like ascetic practices, they only bake from one house or only bake from 2 houses, maximum only 7 houses. And then they take one saucerful of food a day or 2 or 3, etc. And also eating once a day, once every 2 days, up to once every 14 days. But when they eat as much as they can. Then after that they starve for 13 days, after that they eat again. So this is what he thinks is development of body. And then the Buddha said, but do they subsist on so little agivesana? And he said, no, Master Gotama. Sometimes they consume excellent hard food, eat excellent soft food, taste excellent delicacies, drink excellent drinks. Thereby they again regain their strength, fortify themselves and become fat. And the Buddha said, what they earlier abandoned agivesana, they later gather together again. That is how there is increase and decrease of this body. But what have you learned about development of mind? When Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was asked by the Blessed One about development of mind, he was unable to answer. Stop here for a moment. So here, just now, his idea of development of body is to subject it to ascetic practices, painful practices. But when the Buddha asked him to describe what you mean by development of mind, he had no idea how to develop the mind. Then the Blessed One told him, what you have just spoken of as development of body, agivesana, is not development of body according to the Dhamma in the Noble One's discipline. Since you do not know what development of body is, how could you know what development of mind is? Nevertheless, agivesana, as to how one is undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, sir, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, replied. The Blessed One said, how agivesana is one undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind. Here agivesana, pleasant feeling arises in an untaught ordinary person. Touched by that pleasant feeling, he lusts after pleasure and continues to lust after pleasure. That pleasant feeling of his ceases. With the cessation of the pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. Touched by that painful feeling, he sorrows, grieves and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in him, it invades his mind and remains because body is not developed. And when that painful feeling has arisen in him, it invades his mind and remains because mind is not developed. Anyone in whom in this double manner arisen pleasant feeling invades his mind and remains because body is not developed, and arisen painful feeling invades his mind and remains because mind is not developed, is thus undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind. So here the Buddha says that a person who is undeveloped in body, when pleasant feeling arises, then he lusts after it. And one undeveloped in mind, when painful feeling arises, it also invades his mind and remains. And how agivesana is one developed in body and developed in mind. Here agivesana, pleasant feeling arises in a well-taught noble disciple. Touched by that pleasant feeling, he does not lust after pleasure or continue to lust after pleasure. That pleasant feeling of his ceases. With the cessation of the pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. Touched by that painful feeling, he does not sorrow, grieve and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in him, it does not invade his mind and remain, because body is developed. And when that painful feeling has arisen in him, it does not invade his mind and remain, because mind is developed. Anyone in whom in this double manner arisen pleasant feeling does not invade his mind and remain, because body is developed. And arisen painful feeling does not invade his mind and remain, because mind is developed, is thus developed in body and developed in mind. I'll stop here for a moment. So Here, develop in body is the reverse. Person develop in body, when pleasant feeling arises, he does not lust after it. And person develop in mind, when painful feeling arises, he does not sorrow, grieve and lament, he accepts it. According to the commentary, one develop in body means one who has insight. One who has insight. And one develop in mind means one who has concentration, jhanas. They assume when suffering comes, they enter jhana. But I think these two develop in body and develop in mind and refer to an Arya. You see a person with right view, an Arya, he knows the danger of pleasant feeling. So when any pleasant feeling arises, he knows it is impermanent. So he does not crave for it. And then when painful feeling arises, he also accepts it. And he does not evade his mind and remain because he does not think there's no proliferation of thoughts. As the Buddha says in the Sutta, an ordinary person has two kinds of suffering, bodily pain and mental pain, whereas an Arya has only bodily suffering. An Arya does not have mental suffering because he does not think too much about it. He accepts whatever comes as karma vipaka. And Saccaka said, I have confidence in Master Gotama thus. Master Gotama is developed in body and developed in mind. And the Buddha said, surely Agivesana, your words are offensive and discourteous, but still I will answer you. Since I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness, it has not been possible for arisen pleasant feeling to invade my mind and remain, or for arisen painful feeling to invade my mind and remain. Let's stop here for a moment. So here you see, this Saccaka, he says, I have confidence that Master Gotama is developed in body and developed in mind. So the Buddha says, your words are offensive and discourteous. Why? Because he's asking the Buddha to say whether the Buddha is developed in body or developed in mind. And a lay person is not supposed to ask a monk about his attainments, and a monk is not supposed to speak of his attainments. So you should not ask a monk, have you attained jhana? Have you attained this and attained sotapanna? All this, it is offensive. So the Buddha says, ever since he went forth, arisen pleasant feelings do not invade his mind, or arisen painful feelings also do not invade his mind and remain. And Saccaka asked, has there never arisen in Master Gotama a feeling so pleasant that it could invade his mind and remain? Has there never arisen in Master Gotama a feeling so painful that it could invade his mind and remain? And the Buddha said, why not, Agivesana? Here, Agivesana, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought, household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy, while living in a home, to lead the holy life, utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessing of youth, in the prime of life, etc. Here the Buddha describes exactly what he said in Sutta 26. That's page 256. I won't read the whole thing, but I will say basically. So the Buddha said that in front of his parents he left the home life. Then he went to learn the meditation under Alara Kalama first. But because he did not attain enlightenment, he left him. but he attained the base of nothingness, the arupa. Then after that, he went to look for another meditation teacher. That was Uddaka Ramaputta, and he was able to attain the state of meditation that Uddaka Ramaputta attained, which is the highest arupa, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. But still, he did not become enlightened. So he left Uddaka Ramaputta. Then after that, he went through 6 years of ascetic practices, for which he suffered a lot and became so thin that he nearly died. Then after that, he decided to go on the middle path, and then he found a suitable place to practice by the banks of the river near Uruvela. Then the Buddha said, "Now these 3 similes occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agivesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying in the water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood and is lying in water. Eventually the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agivesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who still do not live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the first simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, during the Buddha's days, when you want to make fire, you take an upper fire stick, is held vertically, and then you get another piece which is put horizontally, and then you rub until heat is generated. Then they put some fine wood shavings or anything to start the fire. But this bottom piece, the Buddha says, suppose you use this bottom piece is wet externally and wet internally. The whole piece has been lying in water, so it's soaked with water, and outside also is wet. There's no hope of making a fire. In the same way, if a monk is bodily and mentally not withdrawn from sensual desire, then there's no hope of enlightenment. Bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures means he does not use the body to engage in sensual pleasures, and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures also, he does not think about sensual pleasures. Again, Agivesana, a second simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agivesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, even though it is lying on dry land, far from water. Eventually, the man will reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agivesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, Even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the second simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Stop here for a moment. So here the second piece of wood that the Buddha says is unable to start a fire is the wood inside is dry because it's been lying on dry land. Well, outside is wet, just like a piece of wood, suppose on the ground, and the rain came last night, so it became wet. So if you want to make a fire, you won't be able to. So the Buddha says, in the same way, there are some monks, bodily and mentally they are withdrawn from sensual pleasures. That means they don't engage in sensual pleasures through the body, and they also don't think of sensual pleasures, using the mind to daydream and fantasize and all these things. But the sensual desire has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. That means deep inside, the desire has not been rooted out. And then again, Agivesana. The third simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agivesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by rubbing it against a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? Yes, Master Gautama. Why so? Because it is a dry, sapless piece of wood, and it is lying on dry land, far from water. So too, Agivesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose desire, affection, infatuation, thirst and fever for sensual pleasures has been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. These are the three similes that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Stop here for a moment. So these three similes, the first one is the wood is wet inside and outside. The second one, inside is dry but outside is wet. The third one is dry inside and dry outside. Only the third one you can produce fire. So in the same way, the Buddha says, for a person to become enlightened, he has not only to be bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but the sensual desire must be fully abandoned and suppressed internally. How can you abandon and suppress this sensual desire internally? This you have to look at the hindrances. Of the 5 hindrances, one of them is sensual desire. So if a person, for example, he understands the Dhamma, he understands that sensual desire is unwholesome, it can lead to repeated rebirth. So having understood the Dhamma, he does not engage in sensual pleasures, and he does not want to think about sensual pleasures also. But because he has not eliminated this hindrance of sensual desire, which is the first hindrance of the 5 hindrances. If he has not eliminated this hindrance, then the tendency to want to enjoy sensual pleasures is still there. For example, if a person practices, like nowadays they practice vipassana meditation, they don't want to practice samatha. So they know the Dhamma to the extent that they are bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures. But because the sensual desire, the hindrance of sensual desire is not rooted out, in their dreams they can still want to engage in sensual pleasures. But person who has attained the jhanas and eliminated this sensual desire, then he would not have the tendency to want to engage in sensual pleasures. So he has a chance of becoming enlightened. He is like this third type of wood. Again, we consider it in terms of the factors. A person who is a Sotapanna, the Buddha says, he has not attained Sotapanna, does not need to attain the 4 jhanas. Sotapanna is Sakadagami, first and second fruition. Arya, they have eliminated three factors. The second fruition, Sakadagami, eliminated three factors and also weakened greed, hatred and delusion. So it is only the Anagamin who has destroyed the factor of ill will and sensual desire. So a person who to be able to become an Anagamin, you got to have 4 jhanas. So when a person has perfect samadhi, 4 jhanas, then this sensual desire is abandoned. So sometimes that's why in the suttas the Buddha says, if you were to slander even an external ascetic who has gotten rid of sensual desire, that means he has attained the jhanas, your karmic offense is very great. So you can see from here, if a person has not attained the jhanas, there is no hope. It's just like the sappy piece of wood. Then the Buddha continued, I thought, suppose with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind. So with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind. While I did so, sweat ran from my armpits. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him and crush him, so too with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind, and sweat ran from my armpits. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. I stop here for a moment. So here you see, the Buddha was trying to use his mind to crush his mind. What does this mean? Because a person like the Buddha, he wants to become enlightened. And then when he analyzes, he knows it is this consciousness, this awareness, this mind that creates all the pain. As long as we are aware, as long as the mind is working, we are aware of pain, we are aware of suffering. But if this mind were to stop working, then we are not aware of any pain. There's no more suffering when the mind just stops. So because he didn't know the Dhamma, he used the strength of his mind to crush his mind. So here you can see here that the Buddha did not succeed. But I think there are some external ascetics who managed to succeed. So what happens when they crush the mind with mind and the consciousness ceases, then they become unconscious. That's why there's a class of beings called Asanya Satta. Asanya Satta are supposed to be a class of beings in the fourth jhana heaven. And they are just a blob of body with no mind. They are not conscious at all. They have no perception, no consciousness, no feeling. So probably they are this type of ascetics who use mind to crush mind, and they succeeded. So when they were reborn, the mind stopped working. But they'll be there for a very long time. I don't know how many world cycles. And after that, when they have used up their time. Suddenly the mind starts working and they fall out from there. But because they have not become an Arya, they still be in the round of rebirths, up and down. So here is interesting how the Buddha tried to one of the ways to get out of samsara, but did not succeed. I thought, suppose I practice the breathingless meditation. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth and nose. While I did so, there was a loud sound of winds coming out from my ear holes. Just as there is a loud sound when the smith's bellows are blown, so too, while I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my nose and ears, and nose and mouth. While I stopped the in-breaths through my nose and mouth, there was a loud sound of winds coming through my ear holes. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. Stop here for a moment again. You see these two cases, the Buddha used so much effort and the body was in great pain. But you notice here, his tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established. Because his concentration was so good, the mindfulness did not slip. And even the painful feeling that arose, extreme pain, did not manage to invade his mind and remain because his mind was so strong. That happens with somebody like the Buddha who has attained the arupas, arupa jhanas. I thought, suppose I practice further the breathingless meditation. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears. While I did so, violent winds cut through my head, just as if a strong man was splitting my head open with a sharp sword. So too, while I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears, violent winds cut through my head. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. I thought, suppose I practice further the breathingless meditation. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears. While I did so, there were violent pains in my head, just as if a strong man were tightening a tough leather strap around my head as a headband. So too, while I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears, there were violent pains in my head. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. I thought, suppose I practice further the breathingless meditation. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears. While I did so, violent winds carved up my belly, just as if a skilled butcher or his apprentice were to carve up an ox's belly with a sharp butcher's knife. So too, while I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose and ears, violent winds carved up my belly. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. I thought, suppose I practice further the breathingless meditation. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths to my mouth, nose and ears. While I did so, there was a violent burning in my body. It was as if two strong men were to seize a weaker man by both arms and roast him over a pit of hot coals. So too, while I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths to my mouth, nose and ears, there was a violent burning in my body. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. Stop here for a moment. So you see, the Buddha's efforts, such great efforts, and a person without a strong mind, without jhana, could not possibly practice what the Buddha practiced, because the pains were going through all his body, and yet he could stand it because his mind was so strong. Now when deities saw me, some said, the recluse Gautama is dead. Other deities said, the recluse Gotama is not dead, he is dying. And other deities said, the recluse Gotama is not dead nor dying, he is an Arahant, for such is the way Arahants abide. I thought, suppose I practice entirely cutting off food. Then deities came to me and said, good sir, do not practice entirely cutting off food. If you do so, we shall infuse heavenly food into the pores of your skin, and you will live on that. I considered, if I claim to be completely fasting while these deities infuse heavenly food into the pores of my skin, and I live on that, then I shall be lying. So I dismissed those deities, saying, there is no need. You see here, even the deities pity him so much. I thought, suppose I take very little food, a handful each time, whether of bean soup or lentil soup or veg soup or pea soup. So I took very little food, a handful each time, whether of bean soup or lentil soup or veg soup or pea soup. While I did so, my body reached a state of extreme emaciation. Because of eating so little, my limbs became like the jotted segments of vine stems or bamboo stems. Because of eating so little, my backside became like a camel's hoof sunk in. Because of eating so little, the projections on my spine stood forth like corded beads. Because of eating so little, my ribs jutted out as gaunt as the crazy rafters of an old roofless barn. Because of eating so little, the gleam of my eyes sank far down in their sockets, looking like the gleam of water that has sunk far down in a deep well. Because of eating so little, my scalp shriveled and withered, as a green bitter gourd shrivels and withers in the wind and sun. Because of eating so little, my belly skin adhered to my backbone. Thus, if I touched my belly skin, I encountered my backbone. And if I touched my backbone, I encountered my belly skin. Entirely no stomach at all. Because of eating so little, if I urinated or defecated, I fell over on my face there. It's so weak now. Because of eating so little, if I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair, rotted at its roots, fell from my body as I rubbed. Now when people saw me, some said, the recluse Gotama is black. Other people said, the recluse Gotama is not black, he is brown. Other people said, the recluse Gotama is neither black nor brown, he is golden skinned. So much had the clear, bright color of my skin deteriorated through eating so little. I thought, whatever recluses or Brahmins in the past have experienced painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost, there is none beyond this. And whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will experience painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost, there is none beyond this. And whatever recluses and Brahmins at present experience painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost, for there is none beyond this. But by this racking practice of austerities, I have not attained any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Could there be another path to enlightenment? I considered. I recall when my father, the Sakyan, was occupied while I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, jambu tree, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. Could that be the path to enlightenment? Then following on that memory came the realization, that is the path to enlightenment. I thought, why am I afraid of that pleasure that has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unwholesome states? I thought, I am not afraid of that pleasure since it has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unwholesome states. I stop here for a moment. So after a lot of ascetic practices, the Buddha almost died. And after that, he thought very hard, what is that path to enlightenment? Then he remembered when he was a small boy, he could enter the first jhana. Then following on that memory, he realized that is the path to enlightenment. Then he recalled, why didn't he use this jhana before? Then he recalled, because he thought that jhanic pleasure is blamable because it is enjoyment. Because a lot of ascetics say the way to enlightenment is not through enjoyment but through suffering. So that's why he gave up the jhanas. But now he realized that the jhanic bliss is different from sensual pleasures, completely different. It's nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unwholesome states. Jhanic bliss, jhanic pleasure is a very wholesome state. I considered, it is not easy to attain that pleasure with the body so excessively emaciated. Suppose I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and bread, and I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and bread. At that time, 5 monks were waiting upon me, thinking, if our recluse Gotama achieves some higher state, he will inform us. But when I ate the boiled rice and bread, the 5 monks were disgusted and left me, thinking, the recluse Gotama now lives luxuriously. He has given up his striving and reverted to luxury. Stop here for a moment. These 5 monks were his disciples, and they were all striving together. But when the Buddha decided to take the middle path, they looked down on him and left him. Now when I had eaten solid food and regained my strength, and quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. But such pleasant feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. Stop here for a moment. This is very important. The pleasant feeling that arises in meditation does not invade the mind and remain. There's a sutta, I think Majjhima Nikāya, Sutta 43, where one Arahant said that worldly pleasures, when we engage in worldly pleasures, there is a tendency to crave for it. There's a natural tendency to crave for it. Just like a child, after eating ice cream or chocolate, there's a tendency to crave for it. But with jhanic bliss, the mind in jhana is so strong, it's in complete control of itself. So even when pleasant feelings arise, it does not invade the mind and remain. There is no tendency to lust for this jhanic bliss that is stated in the Majjhima Nikāya Sutta 43. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, I entered upon and abided in the second jhana, then in the third jhana, fourth jhana. But such pleasant feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. Stop here for a moment. So you see here, before the Buddha could recollect his past lives, he had to attain the 4 jhanas. After attaining the 4 jhanas, the Buddha says, the mind is concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability. In the right state to use. Then he recollected his many 4 past lives. This was his first true knowledge attained by me in the first watch of the night. Then after that, he attained the second knowledge, the knowledge of passing away and reappearance of beings, which we read earlier. This was the second knowledge. And then the third knowledge he attained was the understanding the 4 noble truths and the asavas, destruction of the asavas. When I knew and saw thus, my mind was liberated from the chain of sensual desire, being, and ignorance. When it was liberated, there came the knowledge it is liberated. I directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Agivesana, I recall teaching the Dhamma to an assembly of many hundreds. Perhaps each person thinks the recluse Gotama is teaching the Dhamma, especially for me. But it should not be so regarded. The Tathagata teaches the Dhamma to others only to give them knowledge. When the talk is finished, Agivesana, then I steady my mind internally, quieten it, bring it to singleness, and concentrate it on that same sign of concentration as before, in which I constantly abide. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha, when he is not in meditation, then he teaches the Dhamma. But when he is not teaching the Dhamma to others, he is constantly in the jhanas, the same sign of concentration, concentrating on that same sign of concentration as before, in which I constantly abide. Arahants always abide in the jhanas. And then this man said, this can be believed of Master Gotama, since he is Arahant Sammasambuddha. But does Master Gotama recall sleeping during the day? The Buddha said, I recall Agivesana in the last month of the hot season. On returning from my alms round after my meal, I lay out my outer robe folded in 4, and lying down on my right side, I fall asleep mindful and fully aware. I stop here for a moment. Arahants are supposed to have sati, mindfulness, or recollection 24 hours a day. Their mind is so strong, even when they fall asleep, their mind is mindful. The body is resting, the mind is resting, but the mindfulness does not stop 24 hours a day. And this Saccaka said, some recluses and Brahmins call that abiding in delusion, Master Gotama. And Buddha said, it is not in such a way that one is deluded or undeluded, Agivesana. As to how one is deluded or undeluded, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, sir, Saccaka, the Dinganta's son, replied. The Blessed One said, him I call deluded, Agivesana, who has not abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. For it is with the non-abandoning of the taints that one is deluded. Him I call undeluded, who has abandoned the taints that defile, bring the renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. For it is with the abandoning of the taints that one is undeluded. The Tathagata Agivesana has abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. He has cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Just as a palm tree whose crown is cut off is incapable of further growth, so too the Tathagata has abandoned the taints that defile, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. When this was said, Saccaka, the Nikanta's son, said, it is wonderful, Master Gotama. It is marvelous how when Master Gotama is spoken to offensively again and again, assailed by discourteous courses of speech, the color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as is to be expected of one who is Arahant Sammasambuddha. I recall Master Gotama engaging Purana Kassapa in debate. And then he prevaricated, led the talk aside, and showed anger, hate, and bitterness. But when Master Gotama is spoken to offensively again and again, assaulted by discourteous courses of speech, the color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as to be expected of one who is Arahant and Sammasambuddha. I recall Master Gotama engaging Makali Gosala, the same way Ajita Kesa Kambalin, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjaya Balati Putta, Niganta Nataputta in debate, and then they prevaricated, led the talk aside, and showed anger, hate, and bitterness. But when Master Gotama is spoken to offensively again and again, assailed by discourteous courses of speech, the color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as to be expected of one who is Arahant Sammasambuddha. And now, Master Gotama, we depart. We are busy and have much to do. Now is the time, Agivesana, to do as you think fit. Then Saccaka, the Diganta's son, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words, got up from his seat and departed. That's the end of the sutta. So this last part, when this Saccaka, because he's such a great debater, when he corners these external eccentrics, they can't answer him properly. They get angry. But when he knows that he's speaking to the Buddha offensively again and again, using discourteous courses of speech, but each time he uses offensive speech, instead of getting angry, the Buddha rises up to his challenge, the face brightens, and skin brightens. So the Buddha never gets angry. So he's very impressed by the Buddha. So this is quite a long sutta. So the Buddha here describes all the painful practices he went through. Stop breathing is extremely painful. All the pain in the head, pain in the body, and all that. But he could withstand it because the mind was so strong. So here you see the Buddha says in this sutta, worth noting is that for a person to hope to become enlightened, he must not only be withdrawn from sensual pleasures, bodily and mentally, even the tendency must be fully abandoned, suppressed internally, even deep inside. There is no more desire for sensual pleasures. Otherwise, there is no hope for enlightenment. And this you can only do when you get rid of the hindrance of sensual desire. So, okay, we stop here. For nearly 1.5 hours. Okay, anything to discuss?
Bhante, in Sutta 55, Culasaccaka asked the Venerable Asaji how the Master wants to explain his disciple. Isn't it more relevant for Venerable Asaji to explain the Vinaya rules?
Vinaya rules, as we saw yesterday, is the bottom part of the training. Remember, we read the suttas, how a monk, when he becomes a monk, the very bottom is getting fame. And then the Buddha says a monk should not be content with that. After that, he should practice sila. Sila is the Vinaya rules. And after that, the Buddha said, I should not be content with that. Then after that, he should go further. And after that, he should get concentration. Then after concentration, then he should get the knowledge and vision. Knowledge and vision, the different Aryan stages. So, Vinaya is a tool, but to become enlightened, the Dhamma is more important. Dhamma is more important than Vinaya. So that's why the Buddha always mentions Dhamma Vinaya, Dhamma first and then Vinaya. Also, in the Noble Eightfold Path, you find perfect sila consists of 3 factors. And these 3 factors are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And these 3 factors, if you look into it, right speech, there are 4 precepts. Right action, there are 3 precepts. Right livelihood is covered by right speech and right action. So actually, the sila component, moral conduct in the Noble Eightfold Path consists of 7 precepts. But in the monks' Vinaya, there are 227 precepts. A lot of it is only to give the Sangha a good image. A lot of these precepts, if a monk breaks the precepts, he does not do moral, he's not doing some karmic offense. For example, in fact, some of the rules out of these 227, the first person who broke it sometimes were arahants. For example, once an arahant, he came to a certain town. He was traveling a long distance. So he came to a certain town, and he wanted to look for a place to stay. And I guess during those times, they had these rest houses. And the person in charge, the manager of the rest house, was a woman. And this arahant, I'm not sure whether it was Anuruddha, happened to be a very handsome arahant. So, and also the rest house happened to be full. So he came in the evening and he wanted a place to stay. So the manager found that all the rooms are full. So the manager told him, all the rooms are taken up, but if you don't mind, you can take my room. Then being an arahant, doesn't have any, his mind is very straightforward. Thought, any room will do. So he agreed. So he went to live in that room. But in the middle of the night, this woman came to tempt him. Took off the clothes and everything. But because he was an arahant, he was not moved. He didn't do anything. And then after that, the woman apologized to him. And then after that, the next morning he left. When he went back to the monastery, he told other monks what happened. And then the other monks informed the Buddha. And the Buddha called him up. And then in front of everybody, made this rule. Any monk, when he stays anywhere, you cannot stay in a place where there is a woman. So this is one of the rules. First was spoken by a monk. Another one was, there was one ascetic arahant. He lived high up in the hills. And then when he goes on alms round, he has to walk a very long distance, several kilometers to the village for alms food. So after he gets his alms food, he walks a long distance back to the hill, to the top of the hill. So he stays there. And because it takes so long to walk up and down, he thought the food that he has taken, he will keep overnight, and it could last him 3 or 4 days. So 3 or 4 days once, he will come on alms round. So after eating the food the first day, the next day he will dry it in the sun. So it becomes dry, he can still eat for a few more days. So when the Buddha heard about it, the Buddha said, no, you cannot store your food overnight. Every day you have to come and beg for your food. So there's nothing wrong, actually morally wrong, with keeping the food overnight, right? But the Buddha wanted the monks maybe to firstly to give a chance for lay people to do merit. Secondly, he doesn't want monks to store food once you are in the habit of keeping food and always want to store food overnight. He wants the monks to be free of all these things. Once you store food, there's something to tie you down. But you don't store anything, you don't keep anything. Anytime you can travel anywhere, like the Buddha says, like a bird. Just it needs a pair of wings, it can fly anywhere. So monk's property just is set of 3 robes and alms bowl. He can go everywhere he wants. And that's the problem with China. The emperor didn't have the wisdom of the Buddha. He forced the monks to be vegetarians. After that, the monks could not travel like a bird, going anywhere and beg for food. Clip their wings. They had to stay put in the monastery and cook their own food and do chanting to get money and all these things. So actually in the Buddha's discipline, taking a particular type of food, choosy about food, is an impediment in the holy life. That's why the Buddha disallowed monks to become vegetarians. Devadatta asked the Buddha to make this rule so that monks must become vegetarians. The Buddha said no. The Buddha said as long as we eat meat which is pure in 3 respects, you don't see, you don't hear, you don't suspect that it was purposely killed for you, then you take it with no coming offense. And that is very suitable for a monk. Then a monk can go anywhere, live anywhere. Because basically a monk has to live in lonely places. The Buddha wants the monks to live in lonely places like he himself. And if you do that, you cannot be choosy about your food. Okay, let's start some merit.